Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Phil. Welcome to Phil's Computer Lab and a build guide for a 1 GHz retro gaming PC. All the parts can be found in the description, or just keep watching the video, everything will be explained. So enjoy this video, guys. So the motherboard we're using today is the XPK7V600, which has the VIA KT600 chipset. Here's the AMD Athlon 1 GHz. We've got 3 DDR memory slots. Here goes the power supply. We've got a floppy connector, 2 IDE, 2 SATA interfaces, 5 PCI, and an AGP 8X interface for the graphics card. The motherboard has been in storage for a long time, so it's definitely getting a brand new battery. In terms of interfaces, we've got 2 PS2 ports, 4 USB, 2 serial, a parallel, also an Ethernet connector and audio ports. There are only 2 jumpers on this motherboard of interest. The first one is here for clearing the CMOS. The other one is over here, and this one has to do with the frontside bus. If you're using a CPU that runs at 100 MHz frontside bus, you should leave the jumper closed. However, if you're using a CPU that uses 133 or one of the higher frontside bus speeds, then remove the jumper and it will auto-detect the frontside bus. So we're using a CPU with 133 MHz FSB, so I removed the jumper and it should auto-detect the clock speed. Found another pair of jumpers that are worth talking about. If you see a bunch of jumpers near the audio port, that can also be interesting. The reason I'm bringing this up is recently I worked on another project and I just didn't get any audio out with the rear ports, and it turned out that it was configured in a way that only the front panel audio was working. So check with the user manual if you're having issues with the audio out at the back. Check with the user manual and see if there are any jumpers nearby that you need to configure. Okay, the next part has to do with installing the CPU cooler, and here you just have to be a little bit careful because on the AMD Athlon the CPU die is exposed and is a little bit vulnerable. You can easily chip off some of the corners if you handle it a little bit too rough. So the cooler will rest on these rubber pads here, and also there's a bit of a different height over here, so use that to orient the cooler. For example, we can see that we've got the same height over here, and that goes this way. So don't put it the other way around, it should go that way. The cooler I'm using is from StarTech. I got that a couple of years ago. They're still selling them, and it's rated up to Athlon 1300, I believe, so it should be fine for this project. Applying thermal paste always makes for good discussion. I go with a minimal amount, just enough that when we put the cooler down that it spreads nicely. And then we just attach this side first. We place the cooler down, we rotate it a little bit, and then all we have to do is line this up and push it down. And there you go. And also notice that the cooler I'm using has 3 hooks on this side and also 3 hooks on the other side, and that gives you better stability. You can get coolers that only attach to the center hook, and that means there's more force on that center hook, and if you're unlucky it could actually snap off. Just a little detail, but I've quickly rotated the fan at the top just so that the lead coming out of the fan is a little bit closer to the CPU fan connector. I bought this motherboard brand new in the box off eBay last year, which has the benefit of getting the I/O shield, which is often overlooked, the user manual, and also the drivers. So this is the case we're using from Deepcool. It's called the D-Shield, 50 Australian dollars. It's a budget case, so in the US you're probably looking around $35, but it's got a window and a few other modern features, so it'll give that machine a nice modern look. Now the supplied fan is a 120mm fan, and that's decent enough for what we're doing. However, it comes with one of these dual cables with the larger Molex adapter, so I'll be swapping that one out with one that has a black lead, which is a little bit nicer and also doesn't have that big Molex adapter. So it'll make cable management a little bit easier. And we also need to install the I/O shield. With the fan connector and a bit of cable management, we're just gonna go through here. There's a little exit there, and then we route the fan connector this way, so we can neatly install the motherboard and not have the wire go across. Okay, so it's time to install the motherboard. I usually lay the case on the side. I double check that I have enough of these motherboard standoffs. I count them and I count the holes on the motherboard, that they're not too many and not too little. And then I insert the motherboard and I basically line up the back of the motherboard so it lines up nicely with the I/O shield. And that's it. Now all we have to do is secure the motherboard with some screws. So that's all installed. So I'm just going to connect that fan here to the fan header on the motherboard, and we are good to go. So we're just going to talk about the power supply. The AMD Athlon is quite power hungry and pulls most of the current from the 5-volt rail, which in modern power supplies is not as strong anymore as it was back in the day. So the processor we're using today, the 1 GHz Athlon, has a power rating of 50 watts. So in our case, I'm going to use the FSP Hexa HE500 power supply. On the 5-volt rail, we've got 20 amps. So if you multiply those two numbers, we get 100 watts. So the CPU will consume half of that, so we've got another 50 watts to go, and that will be plenty for this machine. So my tip is, if you're building an Athlon machine, double check on Wikipedia or CPU World how much watts your processor will draw, and then check the 5-volt rail, multiply those two numbers, and it'll give you a good idea. This case has the power supply area actually covered. It's got a little cutout here so we can have a look at the power supply label, I believe. We can mount some, I think, solid state drives here. And in order to install the actual power supply, you have to rotate it around. And then we're just gonna pass it through here. And I believe that's how you mount this power supply. So there you go. So I'll just install that and back in a second. So there you go, that's the power supply installed. So I'm just going to have a look at the back and see what the best course of action is to install the ATX power cable. So this is how I connected the ATX power cable for the time being. I had to tie that additional connector up there a little bit just to get it out of the way. And I'm also using two cable ties just to secure it on the back side. Now I think this will be a very tight fit when putting the cover back on, but it should be enough to close it all up. But we'll find out soon enough whether or not that actually works. Now with the memory, we're going for 512 megabytes of RAM, but I've done a bit of research and it seems that 1 gigabyte is the proper limit for Windows Millennium Edition, which we're going to use in this video, but I haven't tried it yet. I haven't tested it if 1 gigabyte is really the limit. So I'm sticking with 512 megabytes because I know that's safe and that's gonna work. Now the graphics card we're using is the Hercules 3D Prophet 4500 with 64 megabytes of memory. This one has a GPU from PowerVR Kyro 2. It uses a tiled-based render basically, so it has to do less work by figuring out what objects are behind other objects and don't have to be drawn. So to make it easier to install the optical drive and the floppy drive, I just got these front panel cables out of the way. There's a cutout here, so that's where we're going. There you go, so the drives are all installed. We've got the optical drive, the Gotek floppy emulator. The hard drive will just sit inside the hard drive cages. And now I just got to figure out the cable management for the ribbon cables. Let's have a quick look at the current build. So we've got the optical drive up here. This is the Gotek floppy emulator. I routed all the wires through the back. I'm using one of these rounded RD cables and also a rounded floppy lead. The front panel connectors are also already connected. And here we've got the cable management at the back, and I had a look with the height and the cover should go on just fine. So at this point it's probably a good idea to test the computer if it's actually functioning correctly. So I've just hooked up a monitor, a USB keyboard and mouse, and we're just gonna turn it on and see what happens. There we go, so that was the BIOS of the graphics card, and here we've got the motherboard BIOS, and let's see if we can enter it. There you go, that looks pretty good, so we can continue on with the project. Okay guys, let's talk about storage. We're using a 120GB Blitzwolf SSD. There are a couple of options how you can use this solid state drive. You can use the onboard SATA controller. The problem is the VIA SATA controller doesn't communicate to SATA 2 or SATA 3 devices. It can only speak to SATA 1 hard drives. So the other options are using a SATA to IDE bridge or adapter, or using a PCI SATA controller. We're going to go with a PCI SATA controller. It's the Promise SATA 150 TX4, so let's install it into the computer. And the last piece of the puzzle is the sound card. We're going for the Audio 2 ZS. Now this case has a lot of options where you can mount the solid state hard drive. It's got 2 trays here. There are also some trays in the back of the case. However, because it looks quite empty here, we're gonna install the solid state drive right here. It's got a little section right here. And here we got a look at the cable management at the back of the computer. So there are quite a few leads, and hopefully I'll be able to put the cover onto the case. Okay, and we're almost done. We just got to put the side panel on with the window, and then we are good to go. And because we've got a side window, I couldn't help myself. I put in a white LED strip just to show the interior a little bit better. So there you have it, guys. This is the finished 1 GHz retro gaming PC, thanks to your input. Now, going forward, we have to focus on software. So the machine is built, the hardware is all done. Now I'm gonna have a look at installing Windows, doing some benchmarks and so on. I had an initial go and everything seems to work fine, but I haven't done a proper tutorial yet. I can't tell you when the next video will be live, because I have to hook this up to my capture box, get some footage going, and yeah, it's gonna take me a while, and I haven't got a set date. But yeah, I really enjoyed all the comments and your contribution. Hopefully you found the last few videos also interesting, and yeah, I see you soon with another video, guys.